Demographics is Destiny, Arthur Kemp.
Hi everyone, this is Paul Cooper, the host of the Take Note podcast. On this episode, we're going to cover demographics and how they can blow up your investment portfolio. I just quickly wanted to give a shout out to Multifamily University. A lot of the tactics and trends and some of the websites we're going to be using in this video and potentially other episodes have come from this channel. He's got a few really good videos on demographics and how he uses them to make his investment decisions, and how a lot of the bigger players and hedge funds use them to make decisions on which markets they will invest in or avoid. And so if you get a chance, make sure to go check out some of their videos. Again, they mainly focus on multifamily, but a lot of this could also be used on single family and smaller investing, because this is going to be demographics and help you identify target markets. Now, there are several guidelines and things you want to focus on when it comes to demographics, and a lot of these will be very similar to what they show on Multifamily University. Some of them are a little bit tweaked, and a lot of them will just be the way that I use them and how I would go forward. So let's get started. We're going to start with the city guidelines first, and then we can even break it down into neighborhood guidelines. And the city that we're going to cover today is Colorado Springs, very popular city in southern Colorado. It's been doing quite well. And so what we're going to do is we're going to follow these different focuses or rules or guidelines, whatever you'd like to call them, and see if Colorado Springs fits. Now, number one right here is population growth of 20% for roughly the last 15 to 20 years. Now, the website that we're going to use is called City Data. And this website here is city-data.com. And then you can pick whatever city you would like to look at. So we're going to type in Colorado Springs. And here we go. It's pulling up the information for us. Sometimes it's a little bit slow because there's a lot of data and graphs it's pulling up. But the three websites we're mainly going to be using for this are just Google, citydata.com, and then we're going to use the Department of Numbers for some employment information. But Google and City Data will get you most of the information that you could want or need. So now that it's loaded, what we're going to do is we're going to scroll down here. We're going to look at population. This will answer our first question here. So the population in 2017 was 464,474, and the change since 2000 was 28.7%. Now, most of these are going to be listed from 2000 to 2017. Some of them could be 2016 or whatever. That's why we're giving the 15 to 20 year guideline. If you're seeing a 20% growth during that time period or more, and what it lists up here and whatever city you're looking at, then you know that it's probably got pretty sustainable and quality growth. So we can go ahead and put that in. All right, so that was pretty easy answering our first focus or question or guideline, whatever you'd like to call it there. Now, the second one is wage growth of 30% during that same time period or more. So here we go. The next thing is the median household income during that time period. And then it also has the estimated per capita income. So both of these are pretty quality, and you could use either one. But we'll use this one here. So it was $45,081. So it's currently $59,514 minus the $45,081 that it used to be. We'll take that difference, divide it by the $45,081, and we get 32%. So not too shabby. Now, focus number 3 is the median housing value growth of 40% or more during the same time period. And it's conveniently the next thing here on City Data, the estimated median house or condo value in 2017. So we'll take $265,400, subtract out the original $143,300. Then we'll divide that by the $143,300, and we get 85%. Now, before we move on to number 4, I didn't discuss this earlier, but if you look, you can actually compare the city to the rest of the state. So if you look at this, we got the median resident age of 34.7, and the median Colorado age is 36.8, so slightly younger. Colorado Springs, you can see that the wages are slightly lower than the rest of Colorado. And you'd think that that's bad, but really what you're comparing this to is the Denver metro area, because most of Colorado is actually pretty sparse once you leave the I-25 corridor as far as jobs and population. So I guarantee you I guarantee you the Denver metro area, Boulder, Fort Collins area are going to bring this price up. And so Colorado Springs is lower comparatively, but it's also going to be significantly cheaper. So I wouldn't be too worried about this. But if you look at some other areas where there's a really large discrepancy throughout the country, then you may be worried. But then again, as long as it's trending upwards, at a stable fashion over that 15 to almost 20 years that they're going to provide you, then that may not be necessarily a bad thing that it's lower. Real focus number 4 is the crime number is lower than 500 and declining. So if you go down, you scroll down, there's this map area, and that's not what we want. You got to keep scrolling. Here we go. Crime rates in Colorado Springs. This is what you want to look at. And the number we're referring to is the actual crime index number down here. So if you look, back in 2005, it was 411, so significantly below the 500 number. Went up a little bit, then it went down, 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 and then it's gone up. But as you can see, it's trending down comparatively to what it was. There was a spike in 2018 compared to 2017, but it's still well below the 500 mark, and it seems to be trending downward, and it's at least not increasing, so that's good. Now, focus number 5 is the last 12 months of job growth from the Department of Numbers, and you want to see some type of job growth. And normally this would be good, but the problem is right now, every city that I've looked at has declined because of COVID and the economy being in the crapper. So we're going to go look. So I'm going to show you how to actually look it up, but it's going to be low. So this one we kind of have to throw out, unfortunately. So you go to the Department of Numbers, and then you can actually search for the city you're looking for. Control F. Here we go, Colorado Springs. And it's got the employment numbers here showing the increase or decrease in employment. So as you can see, since March came along, there's been a steady decrease in employment, and that's pretty typical for really everywhere right now because of COVID and everything else. But normally you'd want to see some type of steady or preferably positive number. But unfortunately right now, it just, with the economy as a whole, you're probably not going to see that in most areas. So now that we've answered our 5 general city guideline questions, and we have a pretty good feel that Colorado Springs is probably a good city to invest in because they have growth, they have good wage growth, they have good home value growth, the crime is low. And before COVID, they had really good job growth because they have a bunch of military there. They've got the Space Force there, and there are a bunch of good jobs, and a lot of people from the Denver area actually commute from Springs to Denver because they can afford a lot more homes. So even though this is no, I would go ahead and ignore it. And you could say that about most metros or cities right now that at least answer yes to the first 4. So now that we know what city might be good, you might be trying to figure out, well, if I'm not familiar with the area, how do I know what part of the city I should invest in? And, you know, what's a good neighborhood to invest in? Well, thanks to Multifamily University, they had some really good guidelines and some other guidelines that I've seen before that other people use. And it's going to make a lot of sense. And again, it's data driven, so you don't have to guess. So we're going to call these the neighborhood guidelines. And the first one is that the median household income is between $40,000 to $70,000. And that's for renters. So people that are looking to rent homes or apartments, that's what we want the median wage to be at, because that should be high enough to where they should be able to pay and pay on time, but not so high that you're going to have a lot of people leaving and not staying there because they're going to eventually go on to own their own homes. Now, if you're looking to buy homes for an appreciation play and you're not as concerned about making a bunch of money off them as rentals, then you might want to increase that from $40,000 to $55,000 and to $90,000 respectively. So you'd be increasing the low end to $15,000 and the top end an additional $20,000. Now again, certain parts of the country, this isn't going to make sense because they're either going to be significantly lower or significantly higher. If it's significantly lower, you may not want to invest just because it's going to be a really low income area. You know, a low kitchen rehab is going to cost the same on just about any house. And so why would you sink $5,000 to $10,000 into a kitchen on a really cheap house when you could sink that same $5,000 to $10,000 on a higher end or at least mid-range home that's going to have more value? And so that's where a lot of the lower income and lower value rentals can kind of be alligators, because you'll see really high returns, but then you're not taking in the account of the wear and tear and the potential legal and everything else. So these are just good general guidelines for most of the country. Again, you're in a big metro area, you're on the East Coast or West Coast, these numbers are probably going to go out the window just because hopefully people are going to be paid more there. And the median rent, our rule number 2, is probably going to be significantly higher. But let's go ahead and look at the neighborhood tool that City Data has, because it's pretty cool. All right, so we're up here on our map, and it's got this red area is city limits. And so generally you want to follow city limits, because if you go outside of city limits, you never know if there's like a really expensive large home or business that may be increasing the price and everyone else there is has a much lower income or lower valued home, or vice versa. You could have a couple really nice homes and then just one sprawling area that's really cheap that may bring everyone down. If you stay within the red line, which is the city limits, it should have a better data pool to pull from and give you a better average. So if you look down here, it's kind of a heat map for income. So we got below 20,000 all the way up to 140,000. And there's settings over here to where you can choose whatever scale you'd like and hide borders and things like that. I like this one. This seems to work. So if we look at Colorado Springs here, the darker red and pinkish colors will be the areas that have the higher median income. And then the lighter areas will be the areas with the lower median income. So if you knew nothing about the city, what you could do is just focus on the areas that have the better, higher income, or the income you're looking for. So if we were looking for rentals, the suggestion was between 50 and 70,000. Then that means pretty much anything yellow to light orange would be what we're looking for. And if you look here, that's most of the city. If you wanted to then do the higher appreciation plays, or find the better areas of towns, associating higher incomes with the better areas, then what you'd want to do is look for more of the orange and red areas. And those are easier to pick out here. So if we look down here to the south, we've got this neighborhood. This kind of cluster right here seems to be pretty good. And so it gives you the census block group. Unfortunately, it doesn't give you the neighborhood name. But if you click more info, it gives you a bigger breakdown. Households by type. It gives you good ethnic breakdown here, which we'll talk about later. And then the population by sex, median household income or condo value, unemployment rate. So lots of really good info here that after you click it and click more information, you can really get a good breakdown on the area. So the median household income here is 113, 132 to this neighborhood, just a little bit above it, 96, not quite 97 in the neighborhood above that. And then you look over here, these are pretty good too, 70s and 80s, and then finally up to 107 here. And that's just this one little area of town. If we want to go up here, there's a nice other little cluster on the northwest side of the city limits that seems to be fairly well off. Look here, 116, 105, 99, 132, 116. And we got this area that's kind of in and out of the city limits, and it's at 143. So pretty good. This other cluster up here to the north, and then a few little ones around here. But the rest of the city is actually pretty good. So if you look at it, it's a fairly decent middle-class city with some upper middle class and some kind of ritzy areas. The general income here is pretty good. And if we go by this, most of these neighborhoods are probably worth investing in, depending on if you're wanting to do higher end stuff with the appreciation play, if you're looking just for straight cash flow from rentals, and then other demographics. But what we'll do is we're going to pick this neighborhood right here just to see if it meets all of our metrics. So I plugged in our median household income, and obviously we're on the higher end then, because this is a higher area than the rest of the city. So probably a nicer area, probably going to be nicer homes and not so much in the way of apartments. And you may want to buy homes here to rent. You'd want to do further research on the rent in the area to see if you can actually afford a home that will cash flow. It may not. It may be too high. But let's go ahead and finish this exercise with this area. So if we look at this, the median contract rent is over $2,000. So again, this is higher. It may still work if there's enough demand in the area to have these nicer homes rented out. But generally when the economy suffers, and it just in general, you're going to have a harder time getting people for higher rent in ritzier areas, just because most people that can afford that would probably just buy, unless they're only going to be here for short periods of time, And then you have to deal with turnover. So rule 3 is the unemployment rate's no more than 2% higher than the city's average. So if we look, this neighborhood has a 4.59% unemployment rate. And so what we need to do is find the city's unemployment rate, and that's actually really easy. We're just going to go to Google. And here we go. So for Colorado, it's got the national, Colorado and Colorado Springs. So national's 13.3%. I think we all know it's significantly higher than that, with 50 million Americans being unemployed, but whatever. Colorado's 10.2%, so below the national average, and then Colorado Springs is slightly below that, so 9.9% for Colorado. So if we look at that, it's easily passing the unemployment rate focus or rule, because it's significantly lower than the rest of the city. So our next rule, rule 4 for neighborhoods, is we want the poverty rate under 20%. Obviously, if you can get it under 15% or even lower, then that's even better. You want the poverty rate to be pretty low. Even if there are good incomes in the area, it's just, if there's poverty in the area, then that's going to increase the likelihood that someone's not going to pay you, whether it's through rent and or something else, whatever type of transactions you're trying to do. And unfortunately, poverty generally also means that there's more crime in the area. Not always, but generally when people are poor, they're more likely to commit crimes because they're more likely to be desperate and in need. Let's go ahead and check it out. So if we look here, it displays it right here under the employment. Residents below the poverty level, 6.23%. Pretty dang low. That's good. So our final neighborhood rule is ethnic mix. And I'll show you on the city data what it looks like. Now, this is a guideline proposed by the Multifamily University, and I don't know if it's how important it is or isn't. On the surface, it seems to make sense. You do want some type of ethnic mix, just because if you don't have a lot of ethnicity mix in the area, then you're only really giving service to one type of client, and you may or may not miss the mark with them. On the surface, I would prefer to have a better mix. But financially speaking, when it comes to renting and buying houses, I have no idea if it actually helps you or not. But their suggestion is if you look at the pie here, the population by race, this is the ethnic mix pie. So you'd want one large piece, which we got, and then you'd want a fairly large second piece with at least one other race or ethnicity in there to make up a fairly large piece, and preferably a third. Well, if we look at this one, large white, and then small Asian, and then small Hispanic. This one definitely fails that metric, because I believe to qualify as a large second piece, he was looking to get about 20 to 25%. And I doubt on this one we even have 10% non-white in the area. Yeah, so what? 1.4% is Hispanic, 3.3% is Asian. Yeah, so we don't even have, 5% of non-white. So that's ethnicity. This test, it's going to fail, unfortunately. And there's probably a lot of parts of the country and neighborhoods where it will fail, depending on the city. And so that can kind of tell you some stuff. There's a lot of stuff that could go into this ethnicity and race due to the areas, and a lot of it's probably going to be socioeconomics. Now, if you were in an area that was well-to-do and had a really good mix, then that's probably a pretty sweet area to potentially invest in. There's probably not going to be racism, or at least not on the surface. There's not systemic racism there if you have a bunch of different groups there that are all doing well living in the same area. And so that could be important to you. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Again, I have no idea on the whole how important that is. It'd be interesting to see if they were able to compile data across multiple cities to determine if that had any type of influence on better areas to invest. But for this test, unfortunately, this neighborhood would fail, so we'll have to put down a no. So if we go back and look at everything we've done here, then we would say Colorado Springs is probably a screaming hot area by these metrics to invest in for real estate, whether it's rentals or appreciation. But the neighborhood we chose is probably not the best. It may be really good for appreciation, but it's probably not going to be great for rentals. So it'd be one of those things, if you were doing an appreciation play and you like the area, maybe you would buy a home in this neighborhood, rent it out, just hope that you're getting enough to pay for your mortgage, interest, and taxes, and maybe a little bit extra to pay cap expense, and then you pray that they don't ruin the place. And then in a few years, hopefully you could turn around and with appreciation sell it for some profit. But so according to the neighborhood guidelines, this one's probably a pass, just slightly too expensive and virtually no ethnic mix there at all. But we can go quickly look at another neighborhood and see how that would start. So let's try to find a target neighborhood of the 40 to 70K. And the second neighborhood we're going to look at has a median household income of $51,186, which is good because that fits right in these guidelines. Next is check the median rent. Median rent is $902. That's also good. That's on the upper end of the rent spectrum. Let's look at the unemployment rate. Unemployment rate's 12.8%, so significantly higher than the other area we were at. So if we look at this, it's 2.9%, almost 3% higher than the city's average. So we'll give this a yellow, kind of a warning. It's probably fine. And again, it's hard to tell right now with COVID being what it is and messing up our economy. But it's pretty close, within 3. So I wouldn't necessarily rule out this neighborhood just due to that, since everything else so far has been good. But let's check out the poverty rate and ethnic mix and see what those tell us. Residents below the poverty level is 9.3%. So that's awesome. Then let's go check out our ethnic mix. So this neighborhood is much more of a model neighborhood according to the multifamily university guidelines and what they like to do. Still have predominantly white, but we have a large second wedge of 16.3% is Hispanic. Then we've got 8.4% is multi-race. And then we've got 2.8 and 2.8 for Black and Asian. So that's pretty decent diversity. I mean, still predominantly white, but there's a lot more going on in this neighborhood than the other neighborhood. Again, it's hard to tell how much, if any, that'll benefit you financially. That being said, I think most people nowadays would probably prefer to have at least a little bit of a mix in their neighborhood. So as we look at this neighborhood, it looks to probably be a better investment neighborhood for both renters and possibly appreciation than the prior neighborhood. Again, you would probably want to get a little bit more information, maybe talk to some realtors, but these are some pretty good metrics to kind of give you a quick glance of some stuff. It's really important, and honestly, it'd probably make you more knowledgeable about certain cities and neighborhoods than realtors that have been there for years, because you're actually looking at the hard data as opposed to just feels and what, anecdotal evidence of what people have seen and experienced. So really the only thing here that wasn't perfect was the unemployment rate was slightly higher in this neighborhood compared to Colorado Springs as a whole. But again, only, not quite a whole percent higher than our metrics of 2% higher. So I don't think that would necessarily disqualify it. I would look at that and, you'd want to look at other metrics too, like schools, neighborhoods and things like that, certain amenities that would be in neighborhoods. But these are some just good general guidelines to get you started. Now, before we end, we're going to cover one more city real quick. We're not going to go into neighborhoods. We're just going to do the city guidelines. And this is going to be a city that most of you probably heard about. People going in and investing and trying to revitalize it and saying how much money they're making and that it's turning around. But we're going to look at the hard data and see if it's any good. Hi, everyone. Before we get back to the rest of the video, I'd really appreciate it if you take the time to go to bit.ly/dumpedon. That'll take you to our current market survey. I'd really appreciate it if you haven't already filled this out to take the time and fill it out for us. It's really going to help us present some good information here in a few weeks, and you would be entered for a chance to win a bidet attachment from Hello Tushy, so you can finally get cleaned off in the crazy times we have right now. The survey is being extended to Labor Day, and then a week or two later we'll be releasing the results in a podcast so we can go over what people are seeing right now and what they're invested in, and then kind of what people are looking for. It should be a pretty interesting way to figure out what's going on in the markets. But anyways, let's get back to the rest of the video. And that city is Detroit, Michigan. Everyone's known for years that Detroit has been on the decline due to the population leaving and jobs not being very good and high crime. But the past few years, there's been a lot of revitalization in the downtown area. People are saying coming back in and bringing their money. And so we're going to look to see if Detroit as a whole is worth investing in or not. All right, so we've got Detroit, Michigan pulled up here on city data. Let's see what it is. Well, the first one's not looking very good. It's a 29.2% decline. So wrong direction. It's really, really hard for cities to overcome a population decline, let alone a double-digit population decline. 29.2%. That's really bad, and that really shouldn't surprise anyone, because I think the population peaked like back in the 70s, and it's been on the decline ever since. It used to be the largest, most populous city in America, and now it's not. So that makes you think about something. If roughly 1 million people have left Detroit in the last several decades, what happened to all the housing and homes that those people were originally living in? It's city blight. Unfortunately, there's lots of abandoned homes and apartments and other buildings there. So you'll have a bunch of nice homes, then you'll have a block that's just not good, or you'll have half the block where it's abandoned. And so that's actually a pretty important number. That doesn't necessarily mean Detroit isn't worth investing in, but it probably means that you're going to have to be very, very careful and very knowledgeable of the market if you're going to invest in Detroit or another city that has a large population decline. So the next thing we need to look at is the wage growth. So if we look at it, the household income, median household income 2017 was $30,344. In 2000, it was $29,526. So over 17 years, it hasn't even gone up $1,000, which means that due to inflation, people there are now actually making less than what they were making before. I'm pretty sure these numbers don't include inflation. If they did, it's still basically stagnant. So this is not good. And so that gives us a 2.7% increase in the median household income over 17 years. So far, it's not looking too good for Detroit. Let's look at the median housing value growth. So the estimated median house or condo value in 2017, oh my lord, was $50,200 in 2017 and was $62,800 in 2000. So it's actually decreased. And if you look at it compared to the rest of the state, this number's terrible. And the household income number wasn't very good either. So they had a median housing value decrease by $12,600 over 17 years. That's significantly worse than I thought it would be. So roughly a 20% decrease in the last 17 years. So if we look at our first three metrics alone, which are the kind of the big economic metrics, we can basically tell that Detroit's a loser. But let's go ahead and finish this up, and then we'll discuss things a little bit further. So we got to scroll down a bit to get to the crime value numbers, the crime rate, and it's not good. I mean, it's well above 500. I mean, if you look at it, it's decreasing generally over the past roughly 13 years and kind of stalled out in the low 800s. But that's still pretty dang high, significantly higher than the 500 number that we were using as a guideline. All right, so now we're back to the Department of Numbers. Let's see if we can find Detroit. So we'll look at Detroit here. This is the job change for April and the job change for the last 12 months. So 24% for April and then 24.44% for the last year. So that's down pretty significantly. If we look at it, we've got parts of the country that are, there are no positive numbers on here for any of these, but 24 is significantly higher than most of these other cities. And so that combined with the low values and everything else is not good for Detroit. So what does this tell us about Detroit? It tells us that the population is dwindling. There is no wage growth. In fact, wages are actually decreasing slightly before you even include and factor in inflation. Median housing values are down, which is almost unheard of. The crime number is still really high. And then job growth is negative. And it's negative in all states, but 24% is really bad. And in fact, it was towards the bottom of the list. I think it was the within the bottom 5 of the list. So that's not good. So if you look at this from a population and economic standard, Detroit's a loser. I mean, it's a hardcore loser. That doesn't mean that there aren't smart people there making a lot of money. In fact, there are a lot of people there making money, but you're going to have to really know what you're doing, and it's going to have to come down to neighborhoods. In fact, let's go up and look at the city. So here's Detroit, and then here are all the surrounding areas. So if you look at Detroit, if we look at our little heat map here, in the actual city limits of Detroit, there's only a couple areas that kind of have any, color to them that's not yellow. So there are a few little areas that may or may not be good. I mean, there's this one area here where the median household income's 131, but yeah, most of these are teens and 20s. So yeah, most of this area is going to probably be mid 30s or below. So that's not that great. You would need to be very careful in how you go about this. And honestly, we've talked about it before. Detroit's a really tough area. There are good neighborhoods right next to bad neighborhoods. In fact, there are good blocks in the middle of bad blocks. So you would want to become very familiar with Detroit if you wanted to invest there. So if you didn't already live there and you weren't already invested there some other way with family or just wanting to be in that area, you may just want to skip it and try to find a city that is generally doing much better all over as opposed to just certain areas. We zoom out here, we can kind of see some, out as further away you get from Detroit, there's some nice suburbs, and that may be something that you want to look at. But as a whole, just as the city, the downtown, the city limits, probably want to pass on Detroit unless you really, really know what you're doing. So what does this all really mean? It's a good and quick, easy way to have some standardized testing to help you locate some areas that you may want to invest in. That could be real estate, it could be commercial real estate, rentals, single family. It could just be different ways that you want to find cities that are doing well because maybe you have some other type of business that you're going to do there. Maybe you're looking at areas that you want to relocate to because your job can take you to a bunch of different cities. And so maybe you want to try to find the city that seems to be on the up and up the most. And so if you do live there, then hopefully you'll be able to weather any type of financial and economic storms. Or if you're just buying a house there, then hopefully you'd see the most appreciation for your house during the time that you and your family stay there. And so it could be used for a lot of things besides just multifamily or rentals or generic investing. We didn't even cover on how to look up schools, which is also another important factor, because if we were looking at this neighborhood stuff and then you also knew the schools were good and there were some other amenities, maybe some good healthcare nearby, then that would really let you know that that neighborhood's probably a slam dunk neighborhood to invest in. And so then it's just a matter of finding the particular investment in that area where the numbers make sense. So again, this is just a general guideline and introduction to the concept of using demographics to help you invest. Again, check out the Multifamily University channel. They've got some really, really good information on it. In fact, I think they've even got a way to where you can get their free toolkit if you sign up for their email, to where they'll actually give you the top 10 and the bottom 10 cities in the U.S. based off of some of their metrics. And so it's a really good type of cold-blooded scientific way to figure out if an area is good to invest in or not. Because otherwise, you're probably just going to be like, well, I know Joe from my club and he invests in this area, or I've got family in that area, or I've heard people invest in Detroit or this city or that city, and they do well. And they may do well, but you also want to analyze the type of investments that they're doing. Are they doing mid-range housing? Are they doing low income? Are they doing higher income? Because each one's going to have its own differences and costs. Low income, the ROI will look really high and the cost to acquire an asset will be cheap, but you're probably going to spend a lot of money on legal, and you're probably going to spend more money on fix-ups when you have when you're in between tenants. And so that has its cost. Mid-range stuff should be still fairly affordable to most people, probably less headaches, but maybe not. You'll still need to have good tenant screening. And then higher income stuff, your headaches are going to come in a different form. You're probably going to have more vacancy because more people at that price point would rather just buy. You may have to offer more amenities and specialties to get people in there when markets are slow. Because those people, again, could just probably buy. And so you're really going to have to do something special to stand out. So there are lots of different particulars depending on what you want to invest in and your investing style and how you could use this information to really get a general idea of the city or really get laser focused on certain neighborhoods. I hope it was helpful. We're going to do some more of these in the future. In fact, please comment below to let us know what cities you would like us to cover and if there are any neighborhoods you would like us to dive into in those cities to see if they're good or different things you would suggest that we look at because you're interested in. But again, that's it for this episode. Really appreciate you watching it. Let us know what you think, and if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Take care.